Let reflect we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. And I understand that the defense is ready to start the cross-examination of Mr. Bowles. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor. We're going to try and do all that we can and see if there's any issues that we might have to bring it back on a recall or just use our expert later.
Okay.
So I figured that would be a better use of the court.
Okay, so you may proceed with cross-examination.
I can just have a couple minutes, Your Honor. I just walk in the door and mark a couple exhibits.
Okay, sure. One cautionary note on some of the testimony we had just before lunch. You recall on exhibit 530, there was some testimony about the red triangle. And Agent Bowles indicated the approximate azimuth direction from that cell tower where that red triangle would be. He indicated the reason he did that is he was told that was the defendant's sister's address. Whether or not it really is the defendant's sister's address depends on whether or not there's any other evidence that indicates that. That information from Agent Bowles was only to show why he was deciding to put that red triangle there and indicate what direction it was. But again, whether or not it really is Mr. Merritt's sister's address or location, that would depend on whether or not there's evidence to establish that. Okay?
Agent Bowles, sorry for the delay. I want to start back at the beginning, how you got involved in this case.
Yes, sir.
You first became involved when?
I'm sorry, did you ask when?
Yes.
That would be, I believe it was August of 2014.
And that's when you were contacted by a detective, I believe it was Hankey?
Yes, sir.
And he gave you some information about cell tower data and asked you to make maps?
Yes, he provided the call detail records and asked if I could help map those out.
And you did that?
Yes, sir.
And when did you complete that?
I don't recall the exact date. It was probably within the first month or so that I was provided those records. So it would have been late summer, early fall 2014, I believe.
So August, September, somewhere in that range of 2014?
Yeah, I believe. And it was sort of a running, I'd provide a few maps and then he would ask if I could expand the dates, to add a few more dates, and I would do so. So that's sort of how the initial mapping occurred.
And were you contacted personally by Detective Hankey, or were you assigned by the Bureau?
I had worked with Detective Hankey on an unrelated case, unrelated to this one, and through that relationship with him and during that investigation is when I was asked to assist with this particular investigation.
So then you're requested to directly and not assigned?
Yeah, I mean, I was requested by Detective Hankey to assist in the case, yes.
Like your agent in charge and say, Bowles, I want you to go down to San Bernardino, they need some help.
No, that rarely occurs that way.
Now you completed these maps and provided them to the sheriff's department, and then had a discussion with the detective about what you're seeing. That be accurate?
Yeah.
And they kind of wrote a summary up for you?
Yeah, I didn't know they wrote a summary of what I had told them until recently, but yes.
So did you get an opportunity to review the report before it was submitted, saying this is the statements or the opinions of Agent Bolt?
No, I've never read the report.
So you don't know if anything in that report is true or accurate or consistent with your opinion?
No, I've never read the report, sir.
Now, I was looking at your, let's call it a resume, and it shows that you actually had cast training, correct?
Yes, sir. There's various classes associated with that, but yes.
Could you explain to the jury again, in case they didn't hear it all, what CAST is and then what their function is?
Okay, so CAST is an acronym for the Cellular Analysis Survey Team. It is a group of FBI agents that have, and there's actually some task force officers as well, which are local detectives that are assigned to work with us, that have been through a series of several weeks of training. And that process takes approximately 9 weeks. And at the completion of the courses, there's a certification process, and then you ultimately become a certified member of the Cellular Analysis Survey Team.
And when you're a certified member, are you commonly an asset?
Yeah, well, they break us up into two groups. There's field assets and then national assets. So a field asset carries a full caseload of regular investigations like I do in the world of public corruption. And then I assist as needed with federal and state and local law enforcement in matters related to cell phones. The other side of that are national assets, which are full-time members of the CAST team. And I believe there are 14 or 15 of them. I'm not sure the exact number though.
And I should have went back to start with this. You actually have a degree in physics as well.
I do.
And so you kind of helpful to understand the math behind a lot of this, or some of the scientific notions that could be behind cellular towers. That'd be fair to say?
It assisted with understanding the training, but it's not a requirement to do the type of analysis.
It's not, but it helped.
It certainly made life easier for me.
And now the training that you went through for CAST, when did you start that training? Would you want to see your...
Could I see it, please? I've been through a lot of courses.
Yeah, I'll hand you this and I'll ask you questions, and then let me know when you're done with this. So I
Apologize.
and hold on to it as long as you need to.
Thanks, sir. Okay. I'm sorry, well, can you rephrase your question or tell me what the question was one more time, please?
When did you start your CAST training?
Okay, so my official first course that was sponsored by CAST would have been in 2010, which was I believe it was 1 week, and we were in Philadelphia for that class, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
I'm going to pull up the digital copy so I can see what you're referring to. And that was the basic cellular analysis?
Yes, that's offered to quite a few agents. In fact, it's, I believe after sometime around 2012, it actually became very common for almost all new agents coming into the FBI to attend this 1 week course for a very basic cell phone record understanding.
And when you say it's 1 week, how many hours is that?
Typically, it's less than a full 40, because a lot of times they include like a half day on Friday for a travel day back home. So I would estimate 32 to 36 hours, somewhere of that nature.
And was there any tests when you're done to make sure that you understood the material?
Yes, almost every course that I took, I recall taking a test.
And after completing this, were you certified for CAST?
This one course in Philadelphia? No, sir.
And then what's the next course you took?
The next course wasn't until 2015.
And that was again in Philadelphia?
Yes, sir.
And that was advanced cellular analysis.
Yes, sir.
And what did they cover in this course, basically, just generally?
It was similar to the first week of the basic one that I took in 2010, a little more advanced where it broke down each of the various technologies and then went through each of the phone carriers, phone companies, and each company offers different types of records depending on what type of case you're working. So understanding all those different types of records, then applying them in various scenarios and whatnot to come up with a solution.
So is it safe to say after taking that course you had a better understanding of the different type of technology that you could be looking at with cell tower records?
Yes, sir.
And it's fair to say also you got exposure to how each company works in a different kind of way.
Yes, sir.
Because there's no set national protocol, correct?
No, sir.
They just kind of decide really what they want to do and hope everybody else figures it out if they want to look at it.
Yes, each company has their own records they keep in the course of their business.
And that was a 1-week course as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And approximately the same amount of hours?
Yes, sir.
And you had a test on that as well?
That course for sure had a test, I recall. It was a difficult one.
Were you CAS certified after that course?
No, sir.
Okay. So then you took another course in 2015, correct?
Yes.
In Florida?
Yes, sir.
For 2 weeks.
Yes.
And what did you cover in that one? In that course?
That course was much more detailed as far as the technology. It was less about understanding records. It was more about understanding technology as far as the 2G, 3G, and 4G technologies. We also learned about the use of a cell site simulator type equipment, which is equipment that can be used for real-time work when you're working fugitives and whatnot.
Is that where you're tracking the phone real time, or is that when you're testing the cell towers real time?
That would be tracking a phone real-time.
And would that be a GPS tracking, or tracking just based on pinging, or cell tower usage?
Well, I can't get into the technology and how it works, but it's essentially the tracking of cell phones for the purpose of locating people in real time, such as fugitives or missing children or something of that nature.
The details are classified, yeah. Would that be fair to say?
I would say it's outside the scope of my agreed testimony here, sir.
And let's go over that. You're a agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
If I subpoena you to say you have to come testify in court, as a federal agent, the federal government will say, thank you, but no thank you, correct?
Yes, I mean, we try to assist where we need to, but yes, that's true.
It would need the federal government's approval.
Yes, sir.
And when that approval is given with certain caveats of what you can testify about.
Yes, sir.
And in this case, you received obviously approval for that, correct?
Yes, I did.
And the approval was very detailed about what you can testify about, which is what you did on this case.
Yes, sir.
If I get into what kind of training did you have, you know, as an agent, when you first went through, you're gonna be like, I'm sorry, that's not permitted. Would that be fair to say?
If it pertains to my analysis, in this case, I'm happy to answer the question as best I can, sir.
But if it's outside of that, you're not trying to be rude, you're just trying to follow the policy and procedures set up by the federal government.
Yes, that's correct, sir.
So if I ask you something, you say, I can't answer that, it's just, that's the explanation that thinks everybody's clear why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
And that course that you took in Florida was a 2-week course?
Yes, sir.
And was that approximately probably 60 to 70 hours, would you say, or?
It was probably in the range of 72 hours. Because again, I think the final day was we took a test in the morning and then flew home.
So that was a test as well?
Yes, sir.
And then after that course, were you certified as a CAS expert?
No, sir.
Okay. Did Did you do any other training?
Yes, sir. We went to, the next training was in 2016 in Nashville, which was 2 weeks.
And what was the subject matter of that training?
The subject matter of that training is very heavily built on understanding. Again, it was kind of a continuation of what I did in Florida. It was the understanding of the technology, how call detail records are created, how the cell phone chooses the appropriate tower. We also covered some of the drive test equipment, which is what we discussed on direct.
And this was 2 weeks, right?
Yes, sir.
And what month was that in 2016 approximately? Spring, winter, summer, fall?
You know, I remember it was very cold there, so I want to say it was the winter, spring, but I'd have to look at my calendar, sir. I don't remember.
That's fine. I'm just trying to get a basic idea. And this was actually the start of your CAS training, correct?
Yeah, once you get to this point, the 2 weeks in Nashville that I just described, followed by another 2 weeks, creates which that second 2 weeks was in Los Angeles area, and that 4-week process is known as the certification process.
So you did another 2 weeks, approximately 72 hours in LA,
Yes, sir.
covering more about the technology behind cell networks and how they all work and how to read the reports and everything.
Yes, as well as moot court, as well as which moot court is essentially practiced for testifying in court. And we also conducted drive tests on cases in the Los Angeles area.
Okay, so you talk about drive tests. And as you described on direct, I believe drive tests are when you take a piece of equipment that's mobile and you drive around a cell tower network to get the readings of what cell towers are picking up your signal from your equipment, correct?
Yes, it measures the signal strength coming off of all the cell towers in the area where you're driving, and it continues to capture those measurements. It measures not only the signal strength, but also measures the GPS position of where you're taking that measurement as you're driving around. And as you compile that data over several hours of driving, the software, which I didn't write, but the software that parses this data creates on the map the actual coverage area of where you would have to be to connect to that particular cell tower.
And is that something that's information, would that be useful in your line of work?
It would be very useful in cases where you have call records that are in close time proximity to the incident that you're investigating.
Is it useful for cell phone companies?
Yes, sir.
And why is that?
They use it to optimize their networks. So for example, if you drive home every day and you have a drop call in the same intersection, and which is less prevalent now, but years ago it used to be very prevalent, they would receive customer service complaint calls, and the phone company could send out an engineer to conduct a drive test to determine if there was in fact an area that was lacking coverage. And then that would be up to the engineers to decide how they were going to remedy that, either by reorienting a tower or adding a new tower.
And so when you say reorienting a tower, that would mean the sector that we know is pointing at some azimuth, they say we need to kind of turn that.
Yes, correct. They can tilt it laterally, they can tilt it up and down, they could, or if necessary, they could add a new cell tower.
They could add a different band or megahertz, correct?
Yeah, to some degree, yeah. If they use a different band, they may get better coverage depending on the frequency.
Now, the FCC is the one that also governs cell companies, correct?
They govern I don't know all the FCC regulations, but I know they do govern the various frequencies out there and who owns them and what they can do with them.
is part of the FCC requirements that cell phones can help in 911 calls?
Objection, Knox Foundation.
Well, we'll look at it if you know.
Yes, my understanding is they have requirements for the phone companies to be able to locate their phones in an emergency situation.
And one of the ways to show compliance with that is the cell company to do a drive test to show what coverage they have.
I'm not sure if that's a requirement for the FCC, but it certainly helps to know what towers cover what areas.
And now, if I call 911 on my cell phone, I have a Samsung Galaxy. Most of the time, they have a GPS built into the phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if I call up now, 911, I need assistance, they will know I'm likely in this courthouse.
I would like to say hopefully they would.
Hopefully, right?
But yes, it's true. It is my understanding is it's much more accurate now. It's a different system than we use. That's like a public safety system versus like our historical records analysis is slightly different.
In the GSM technology or the 2G technology, generally those phones didn't have the GPS, correct?
Correct.
And so they more relied on what we can get from the network where they can get a general location of it.
Correct. Yeah, there were times back in 2010 where if somebody had a 911 call or it was what they call a hang-up call, where they call 911 and nobody says anything. Typically, my understanding is dispatch would sometimes only get the cell tower and sector, and that could be a very large area for them to figure out where somebody may need help. So sometimes people didn't get help necessary.
So it could be in the northeast corner of Ranch Cucamonga somewhere.
And it could be within a mile or so, wherever that, whatever the area is.
And so when did you actually become certified as a CAS field asset?
I believe that was 2016, and it was the summertime. I want to say it was June.
Then, once you did that certification, you have to recertify every year, correct? Yes.
We're supposed to go to a 1-week conference, and we get some updated information from the cell phone carriers as far as new technology coming out, anything changing in their records moving forward, things of that nature.
And you did that in 2017 as well, correct?
Yes.
And that was in San Antonio, Texas?
Yes, sir.
And that was training really with the major cell carriers?
Yes, each of the carriers come in for, there's 5 major carriers in the U.S., and each day we usually have half the day with an engineer and a subpoena compliance officer from each company.
And that was approximately when in 2017 when you were in Texas? Was it hot in the summer or?
No, I believe it was this month. It's typically in the first few months.
So we're in February, so February 2017?
Yes, sir.
Now, you've gone through all this training. Does part of that training tell you how the cellular operators at the phone companies actually use the data records?
How they use the data records?
Yeah.
Most of our work is built on the historical, like how they store the records. I mean, I have taken a tour of a switch where I saw how they manage drop calls and try to optimize their network and try to find errors in their network. But that was more of a real-time thing.
But do you know how they actually use them inside the company?
Use them for what purpose?
I don't know. That's all I'm going to ask if you know.
No, I mean, the phone company's purpose is to provide service to their customers, and the records they keep are of assistance to law enforcement in various ways.
So the call detail records that are created, and we'll stick with 2G, okay?
Yes, sir.
GSM records. Do you know how those are created generally?
Yes, sir.
And just explain as brief as you can, so we're not
Sure.
wasting too much.
as I stated on direct, when somebody presses send on their phone to make a phone call, that phone is selected. It's the tower that it sees the best signal from, and when they hit send, it generates the initiating cell tower and logs the information regarding that particular transaction. Once the resources have been allocated and a phone call is in session, at some point that phone call will be terminated, and then the terminating tower will be logged at that point.
Now, when they make these records, they use some kind of equipment inside the carrier, correct?
Yes, sir. It's maintained by the switch that controls the cell towers.
Do you know what manufacturer's GSM equipment was used to make the call detail records up in the Victorville area in 2010?
Yeah.
Now, when call detail records are kept, each provider can keep different records.
Yes, sir.
As an example, AT&T keeps all their records for all cell tower data after, I think, 2007, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's 2008, but yes.
Whereas like T-Mobile will keep them for a certain amount of time.
Correct. I believe they are either on a 1-year or 18-month rolling calendar.
So each phone company, each case, what information you can get depends on the time and the carrier. So if you are on a case and it's 1 month after an important date, the odds of you getting all the cell tower data is high. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it's all going to be based on the carrier's retention record, but yes.
When they retain their records, they keep it in-house. So you contact them, say, hey, can we have the records for this phone number for this period?
Yes, sir. I don't know where they store them, but assuming that they control those records, yes.
And then when they decide not to maintain them, they purge them.
Yes, sir. That's my understanding.
Does any of that information get released to the NDCAC?
What information are you referring to?
Just the cell tower records for individual phone calls.
No, that is not maintained by the NDCAC.
That's just too much information.
Well, there's privacy issues. Those are individuals' phone calls, and they would only be released subject to a court order.
And could you explain to the jury what that acronym was, just so they understand what we're talking about?
Yes, the NDCAC is the National Domestic Communications Assistance Center. As the cell phone companies go out and place their cell towers in the community or change their cell towers, reorient their cell towers on an occasional basis, they will update that information. So it's not the calls or individual phone records, it's just where their cell towers exist on the map, so to speak. And that assists law enforcement when it comes to things like responding to 911 calls or trying to find missing children or things of that nature. It allows us an ability to see where these cell towers are and how they're oriented.
And that's only available to law enforcement personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if I call up and say, hey, can I have X, Y, and Z, I first have to find a number.
Yes, sir.
Now on the call detail records, I was going to call them cell detail records. Call detail records, they will list a beginning cell tower and an end cell tower while those records are retained, correct?
Yes.
And do you know the purpose for the phone company to retain that information for individual calls?
I'm not, I don't know 100% the reason for it. There may be a federal regulation that requires them to do so, but I don't know that specific code. So it would be speculation on my part to come up with that.
Fair enough. What purpose does the beginning cell tower have for a cell phone company?
Well, the initiating cell tower will tell them the general location of where somebody was when they requested resources from their company.
And I assume that would be used to figure out if they have enough coverage, what the load is in an area, if they need to increase the tower numbers so they can have better coverage.
Certainly, that could be one of the reasons that they compile that data.
What about the end tower? What's that for the phone company?
Objection, relevance.
Overall, necessary rules.
I don't know the relevance of them logging the end tower, but they do log it.
And the end tower is really the time at which a call ends.
Yes, sir.
And it could be voluntarily or involuntarily.
Certainly.
So if I'm on a phone call and all of a sudden my call cuts out for whatever reason, that's when it's recorded.
Yes, I have seen sometimes in records when calls are dropped that the terminating tower is just left blank. That happens on occasion.
On some of the records that were received in CDRs, it had scamp typed across the top. Do you know what scamp means?
I don't recall what it means. I've seen it before in AT&T records, and it has to do with the format of their records, but I don't know if it's an acronym or what it stands for.
The format of the records that we're seeing in court is not really how they're kept, right? They look a little different.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're asking.
When they just keep records, they don't put all the seizure time notes and all that stuff up top so everybody can read what they, as far as an incoming call.
No, they're stored in-house differently than when a court order or a search warrant is served on them. There's a subpoena compliance officer that pulls those records and puts them into a readable format for law enforcement to use.
Does the information contained on the cell phone records tell you what kind of make and model of phone was being used for that call?
Sometimes on the subscriber sheets, it will tell you the make and model, and then they also provide the equipment identifier, which with some research and digging, you can probably find out what the make and model is.
So if you know what to look at and how to read it, you could probably figure it all out.
Yes, sir.
Have you only done cell site analysis in California?
Yes and no. As far as for court testimony, yes, only in California. When I worked fugitives, I would often, once we would identify what phone the fugitive had, many of them were not in the state of California, so it required conducting an analysis here for where we thought they were in some other state before we requested resources to go out and apprehend the person in that state.
Did you realize, or did you notice if in different regions that they compile their cell data table differently?
Well, each carrier has a different way of storing their records, and yes, there are certain regions that that log their records slightly different.
Now, the call detail record. I'm going to say that wrong 20 times. I promise. They give you the tower information and the azimuth. Do they give you the altitude of the tower?
No, they do not.
Do they give you the angle of adjusted angle for the tower for the antenna?
Are you referring to the down tilt?
Yes.
No, they do not.
Do they give you the megahertz for that tower?
No,
They give you whether it's a single band or dual band tower.
no.
Where do you get that information?
From NDCAC, the communication center that I referred to earlier.
And in there, they have their cell tower tables, right?
Yes, sir.
And they will give you a lot of that information.
It'll be some of that information. They typically don't give you the down tilt. They'll give you the frequency and some of them have the tower height listed in there as well.
And then do they give you the antenna width?
The beam width?
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
And will sometimes show periods where it's changed. They list multiple answers for the equipment at different times.
Yes, as time goes on, as these towers are reoriented or changed because of dropped calls or whatnot, in particular areas, then they update their tower records, yes.
And are you sure they're always accurate?
It's what the engineers input into the system when they go out and change the towers, but
So it's human entry.
I don't know how they actually enter them. I was told in our training that the engineers populate those records.
Have you ever seen any of the records in this case where they have all the azimuths for a tower assigned to the cell tower records, always the same number?
Yes,
So they're all like 0, right?
yes.
Or they're all 49.
I don't know if I saw 49, but I saw zeros, yes.
Wasn't the Quartzite tower, the tower from February 6th on top of the mountain, did that have a lot of just the same numbers populated in the cell tower record?
I'd have to see the ones offhand. I don't recall what those ones showed, but there are times that if there are multiple bands on the tower, they will only show the azimuths for the 3 sectors on one of the bands, and they'll leave the other 3 at 0.
Have you ever seen records to where a tower say listed at 120 degrees and then the next entry shows it's been moved to 140?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen towers that have had their orientation changed over time, yes.
And is it also where you'll sometimes have a tower pointing at 0 degrees, then one pointing at 80, and then one pointing the other direction at, say, 260, because most of the traffic's in this direction?
I mean, I see towers that have 3 sectors. How they oriented them is typically based on usage or geographic limitations because of hills or mountains in the way and things.
So not every tower is going to be set up equidistant from one another, correct?
No, the towers are mostly placed in the community based on capacity and the need for the number of calls that need to go through that area.
So it's fair to say it's not safe to assume the direction of all the towers based on just the direction of one.
I'm sorry,
Not towers, antennas. It's not safe to assume the azimuth direction of all the antennas based on just the knowledge of one. So if I know one antenna is at 10 degrees, that does not mean I automatically know what the other 2 antennas are pointing at.
no, each sector can be set up individually.
Now, you talked about seizure time. And the seizure time, as you described, is the time from when you hit send until there's a connection with the phone call, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know why the cell companies collect seizure time?
I don't know why they do it. I just know that it's in the records and it's been explained to me what seizure time means.
You're familiar with the term directed read drive, correct?
Yes, I've heard the term before.
And that's when if I'm on my phone and I dial my wife's number and I hit send, and I'm listening for the ringing to start, it's not ringing, it's not ringing, it's not ringing, and then it starts. Is that the directed retry? An example of what a directed retry is.
I've never had it described to me that way, but it sounds similar to what you would. I've been told that it's when you attempt to make a phone call and the tower that you're requesting resources from, for one reason or another, doesn't want to carry that call, and so it moves it to an adjacent tower that also has coverage in your area.
And if the tower you want is not accepting resources and it has to send you something else, have you made a connection with that first tower?
Yes, the tower that you initially requested resources from was what populates the first cell tower connection in the CDRs.
That wasn't the question. The question was, is if you hit send and you try and get resources from a tower and it doesn't have any to give you and it sends you to another tower, is there a connection made with that first tower that rejects you?
Yes, well, it's not a traffic channel, but it's a connection in that you're requesting the resources, so there is communication with that first tower.
So there is something going on.
Yes.
It's not like, old radio, I'm trying to find a station, I can't find it until I find it, I don't have anything. There is communication.
Yes, there's a series of messages that go between the phone and the tower to ask for resources, verify the bill's been paid, that the subscriber account is okay, and before the phone company allows that call to move into an actual phone call.
Check and see if you paid the bill.
Yes, sir. They're very good at that.
They're getting their money. Now, you talked about on direct that when you're driving around with your cell phone, it's in constant contact with towers.
It's constantly scanning for towers to find signal strength.
Is it constantly scanning or is it intermittently scanning every few seconds?
Well, it may be every few seconds. I'm not sure the exact interval, but
It's
it's,
the battery life, right?
yes.
So if it was doing it all the time, your battery lasts 30 minutes, everybody would be kind of upset.
Yeah, I don't know the exact interval that it actually scans, but it's fairly frequently in order to establish that connection when you need to use your phone.
It's not constant, but it's not like once an hour.
Correct.
It's just at some range.
Yes, sir.
Now, in August or September of 2014, you made maps, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you made the maps, you didn't write a report, correct?
Correct.
When I mean report, I mean words on a page.
That's correct.
And you didn't offer information about what's on the map other than the information you put on the face of the map.
Correct. I provided the maps back to the sheriff's department at the time.
You didn't provide any conclusions of what can be said based on these maps.
Nothing very formal. I mean, we may have had some conversations at the sheriff's department when I handed the maps over, but I don't recall. I never wrote anything formal up.
And you never wrote anything saying, this is the information I used to make these maps as well, right?
No.
You never said anything on a written format saying, first cell towers are the important ones, not last cell towers, nothing like that was written down.
No, I didn't have that knowledge in 2014.
And on the maps that you created in 2014, you included information from beginning and end tower information, correct? And you were saying you can show direction, you can tell different things from beginning and end tower.
I think I indicated, I'm sorry?
In a limited fashion.
In a limited fashion, I showed that by looking at a beginning and ending tower, you could extrapolate that to determine a possible movement of the cell phone from, point A to point B, so to speak.
And then you went to training and you learned, don't do that. You should really be doing this.
I learned a lot more about cell phones, and I like to be as accurate as I can, so I I made those changes.
And then they told you to follow scales, and they told you different things you're supposed to be doing to be consistent on your reports.
Yes, sir.
And when did you make those changes? When did you give us the new reports?
Well, I was contacted maybe September or October of 2018 and advised that this case was going to go to trial and that they were going to need me as a witness. And so when I looked up the maps that I had produced in the past, I realized that they needed to be modified to include only the initial cell tower and the scale added. So I made those changes prior to this case.
And did you get a copy of our expert's report, written out report?
I did.
And this is one that wrote in detail all their findings and thought process and everything they did, correct?
Yes, sir. It was a lengthy report.
And it also gave references of why they say certain things. This is where you can look if you want to confirm information that I'm saying. That'd be fair to say?
Yeah,
In a limited fashion.
In a limited fashion. I don't recall every word in the report, but yes, it was something of that nature.
And it also critiqued your initial maps as well.
Yes.
And you had to make adjustments to those maps to eliminate the critiques that were given.
Objection, mistakes, his testimony is argumentative.
I believe I provided my maps, modified maps to the district attorney's office prior to receiving the report from your expert.
And then the overhead. Should exhibit 909. And this is the first map that you made in 2014 concerning the February 6th phone calls in Victorville.
That's correct.
And in this, you had the overlap between the tower at 10 degrees and the tower at 85 degrees to be more significant than what you did later.
Yes, I made modifications to that, I want to say 2015, when I realized that it needed to be updated.
So like on the other exhibit for the 10 degrees, which I believe is B1 and B2, you have B2 at about 70 degrees?
Yes, this was an estimate when I provided it to the sheriff's department, but that was it. I didn't use a compass or anything to orient these when I first drew them out.
For the 10 degrees, you have the B2 at 70 degrees, correct?
Yes, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was A2 or B2, but yes, it would be roughly 70 degrees.
And the one you have here is below 90 degrees, correct?
Correct.
So it gets a little bit closer to the crime scene?
And that's why I modified this one back after I made it in approximately 2015.
And you had to turn B1 a little bit more to the left as well, correct?
Yeah, the whole thing needed to be shifted.
Did you not understand the degrees of those towers before you went to this training for CAST in 2016-17?
Oh, I understood them. The software I was using at the time when I made this map, I didn't understand how to get an accurate reading at that time. And so I created this as to show the sheriff's department approximately where those towers were oriented. And after my training in 2015 in Philadelphia, I modified the report to more accurately show how those towers are oriented.
Did you say you didn't modify this until 2018, not after your training?
Objection, argumentative, misstates his testimony.
You waited until 2018 to correct these, correct?
This particular diagram you're showing me here was changed in 2015. It was prior to the preliminary hearing. I don't recall what date that was, so.
So you gave a different one than this one, seen on 909 to the sheriff's department before the prelim.
Yes.
Did you show maps at the prelim that you testified concerning, like having identified an exhibit like we're doing now?
Maps were shown at the prelim, yes.
And then I'll show you 907, side by side, with 909. And those two show the changes, correct?
Yes, the one on the left is the one that I changed just prior to the prelim.
And can you use, is there a laser pointer still up there?
Yes, sir.
Can you show the jury the changes that were made between the two so they can understand what they're seeing?
Yes. So, one of the practices that we used to use, and most of this was because I worked fugitives, is we would use what's called a closed cell. So we would close out the outside box because it helped us working fugitives to try to isolate and determine an area where a fugitive may live. Through the training I took in 2015, I learned that this is not a good representation of cell phone evidence because it indicates that there could possibly be sort of an end of where that coverage ends. So that is a major change that I made. In addition, I learned through the software how to more accurately and using the computer to get the exact azimuths correctly oriented on the sheet of paper. So when I returned from the training in 2015, I applied what I learned and recreated this particular map to more accurately depict the tower as it was oriented for these particular calls.
Now, when a phone is selecting a cell tower on its priority, it's looking for the strongest signal under 2G, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the strength of a signal is based on one, proximity,
That's a major factor, yes.
but also the altitude of the tower, correct?
Yes, strength is, proximity and line of sight are the two primary factors.
What about altitude?
Yeah, well, that would have an effect on the line of sight, yes, sir.
That also has an effect on the strength too, correct?
On the strength of the signal, the strength of the signal is going to be based more on proximity to that tower.
Isn't the strength of a signal exponentially increased on height? The higher this tower, the stronger the signal will be.
I don't believe that to be true, sir.
You weren't trained on that.
No, I don't recall hearing that in my training.
So you've not heard of the Houghton model on how that worked?
No, sir.
Did you review that in the expert report and talk about that?
I don't recall. I mean, I read that report several months ago, and I don't recall reading about that.
Did you do any research on anything described within that report to help you in your testimony in any future date or case?
No, I did not.
So the cell phone will have its priority towers, and then it will make a request for resources. That request is heard and either granted by that tower or sent over to another tower.
Yes, sir. Something to that nature.
And if they accept services at that tower, you get a call and you're talking on the phone.
Yes, sir.
and you can end that call on that same cell tower, or you can go to another one, correct?
Yes, it can end on whatever tower and sector the network chooses.
And so the changing from one tower to a next tower is called a handoff, right?
Yes, sir.
And so if I'm standing here and I make a phone call to my wife, still in trial, not coming home this afternoon, and I don't move, odds are I'm gonna stay on that same tower, right?
It all depends where you're at. You may be equidistant between sectors or between towers, and the network can control which one you're on once you're in that call.
So you don't agree with it, if a call's made while stationary, the odds you're going to be starting and ending the same tower are high.
I don't want to put say it's high or low, because it really depends on if you're standing really close to a tower and there's not another tower within a mile or two, then yes, your odds are high. But if you happen to be right between two towers or between two sectors, the odds could be very high that you may bounce between two towers in the middle of that call without moving.
Last year you testified in People versus Lard Pape, right?
I don't.
Riverside County?
Okay. I don't recall the defendant's name, but.
I'm gonna show you page 17, lines 24 through 28 of your testimony. Page 17, 24 through 28.
Okay. Would you like me to read it?
Would you like, sir?
It says, so if you make a short phone call.
I'm gonna object at this point, Your Honor. There's no foundation, and this is not a proper form of,
Ooh. Go ahead.
It says, so if you make a short phone call while you are stationary, the odds are you're going to be starting and ending the call in the same tower.
Is that what your testimony was? You remember saying that?
I obviously did say that, yes, sir.
Now, we talked about the cell tower records that are kept by, I'm going to say by the FBI, even though it's technically not accurate, it's just easier to say.
Okay.
It's governed by, under the Department of Justice, right? The NDCAC.
I believe so. I'm not sure who oversees it.
But it's something that the FBI has access to.
Yes, it's their cell towers.
I'm going to say it's kept by the FBI. No, we know that's not something you guys do. It's something you have somebody do for you. When those are kept, are any actions taken by the assets, whether field or national, to verify the information is correct?
To my knowledge, no.
Is there anything done to verify that they're complete?
No, they're provided to us by the phone companies.
Now, are you familiar with the Cellular Analyst Survey Team's policy guide?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
I assume you had to read it at some point.
Yeah, I've read it a while ago. I don't recall every word of it though.
And as I spoke to you in the hallway, I think during lunch, I said sometimes those become public if they're declassified or unclassified.
Yes, I believe that's a public one, obviously, because you have it.
Okay. And the FBI, they work in federal investigations for federal court, correct?
Partially, we do work with state, local law enforcement on a regular basis.
But when you do reports and generate a lot of criminal investigation reports. It's usually for federal cases and federal court.
Yeah, the majority of our work is our federal cases, yes, sir.
And when they turn over discovery, they redact things that they feel are necessary for redaction. They do it independently on their own.
You mean the FBI does?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have some redactions that happen.
It's common.
Yes, sir.
And I'm gonna show you, see if this looks like something you recognize, something familiar.
Yeah, it looks like our policy guide.
And it does have redactions, correct?
Yes.
And those redactions seem consistent with how the FBI redacts items.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Like, they don't black it out, they just remove text or images wherever they feel necessary, so it looks blank.
All the redactions I've ever seen were black, so I don't know how that one turned out white, but
And in this, it talks about the requirements of when you receive a case is to log it into the FBI system.
Objection made.
Sustained.
When you are involved in a case to assist non-federal agencies, you're still required to open up an investigative file with the FBI data system, right?
in some cases, yes. In other cases, there's existing FBI case files already open.
But you have to log everything you do into that system.
I don't know if it's necessary that we have to log every single thing in there, but we do on a regular basis log things in our case files just like any other agency.
I'm going to show you 4.94. Have them read this paragraph here. That paragraph. See, that's refresh your memory as policy requirements.
It says all CAS generated evidence and discovery items, including file reports, PowerPoint slides, CDRs, tower lists, map point maps, drive test data, subpoenas, and court orders must be serialized or uploaded to the investigative file or a CAS subfile.
It says must, right?
Yes.
Since they can. FBI likes to be very consistent with their policies, correct?
Yeah.
So what happens in California is the same thing that happens in Alabama.
That's the idea, I believe.
And so, since the policy requires you to upload that, did you upload all your work and have it serialized into the CAS subfile system?
I did not in this case.
And when it's uploaded, it allows also for peer review, correct?
No, sir.
Peer review is important with the FBI though, correct?
It is.
They like everybody to be uniform in what they're testifying to or what they're presenting from the federal government.
I don't think that's the purpose of the peer review. The peer review is to assist in looking for mistakes and looking for accuracy.
And since you didn't upload Exhibit 909, this one, to the system for peer review, you made mistakes, right?
No, the photo or the diagram to the left is what was peer reviewed.
My question was the one on the right.
No, that one was never uploaded.
If you would have followed protocol, it would have been peer reviewed and hopefully corrected, right?
That protocol was from 2018, and I created that map in 2014.
So there was no protocol before this?
To my knowledge, there wasn't. Not pertaining to casts, because I was not a member of a cast in 2014.
a good time to take our afternoon recess?
Sure, I can go to another subject.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess this time, 15 minutes. People learn the admonitions previously given to you, not to follow, stress, any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case. I'll see everyone back in about 15 minutes.